What's up, Renegades? Welcome back to another episode of the Just Winging It podcast. I'm Tattoo Tom. Tonight's episode, as usual, brought to you in association with Lou and Sue Alami over to Alami Realty. Lou and Sue are your end-all be-all for all your mortgage lending, your home selling and buying needs. There's a link in the description. Next week, on the next week's episode, Lou and Sue are actually going to be here as my guests. So you're going to get to find out a little bit more why I adore them so much and why they're big sponsors and what they're going to do with us moving forward. So don't miss next week's episode. You can finally get to meet Lou and Sue, the people that I've been talking about on every episode. So in this week's episode, we're going to start out with what I call the questions and answers jam. A couple of weeks ago, we had Kellen on. And Kellen and I were, during the course of our interview, we came up with this idea that she would, at the end of my interviewing her, she would get an opportunity to ask me 3 questions. Anything that she wanted about anything that she wanted. And it was super fun and it was super cool. And we got a lot of positive feedback. We got a lot of comments and a couple of emails about that segment. They said it was really cool and they wanted to see some more of that on upcoming episodes. So we're going to make that a usual part of when we do interviews. We'll be sure to have the people get an opportunity to ask me questions. And some of the kids particularly can be ruthless with their questions, so it should be pretty fun. But for tonight, just to have some content for tonight's episode, I thought it might be fun to post on social media and give people an opportunity there on our different social media sites to ask me anything they wanted about anything, whether it was childhood cancer, whether it was related to music or sports or something that I'm interested in, another type of topic that I've talked about on my social media. So we got some pretty cool questions, and it should be fun to answer some of them. Some are really funny, some are really serious, and some I'm not even entirely sure how I'm going to answer just yet. So as a name is appropriate for this podcast, I'm just going to wing it. So let's go ahead, and without further ado, let's get started. So the very first question is from D. Kellerman, and D says, which was your first tattoo and what's its story? So I talked about this a little bit briefly last week. My very first tattoo was when I was 12 years old. I stole some India ink from Mrs. Gilmore's art class, and I went back home and locked my bedroom door and took a needle and a thread, and I jabbed and poked and stuck a little cross in the top of my arm. That was my very first tattoo. No real story behind it. It was brave. It was brazen for a 12-year-old. That was about the only story, and I kept it hidden from my parents. But my very first big boy tattoo, the first time I actually went to a tattoo shop to get a tattoo, was this tattoo right here on my arm of this rose, and in the banner it has the name Kimberly. And Kimberly was Shayla's mom, my daughter Shayla's mom. And I just started dating Kimberly, and I was 19 and she was 28, and I was all excited. I was dating an older woman, and we were getting ready to move in with each other. And so I marched down to the tattoo shop and I said, this is true love. And I got this tattoo. And then, I don't know, those of you who are in the tattoo business, you know that the number one curse of a relationship is to get that person's name tattooed on your body. That's like the kiss of death for a relationship. So sure enough, Shayla's mom and I wound up splitting up. And then people would constantly ask me, they'd say, hey, Tom, who's Kimberly? And I'd be like, whoa, well, Kimberly's my ex. So I became this this common answer to that question. She's my ex. Well, I moved down to Florida. I was living in Jacksonville Beach. And this guy moved into my house. His name was Fred. And Fred had just started a band, and he was also an upcoming tattoo artist. But he didn't have a bed. So I wound up trading Fred a bed for a tattoo. And what he did is he put this X through, I hope you guys can see that, he put this X through Kimberly's name. And so now when people said, who's Kimberly? I'd be like, that's my ex. And ha, ha, ha. It was this funny joke. Fred went on to start a band called Limp Bizkit, and he went on to be semi-famous or major famous there for a while, which leads us right into the next question from Josh Hersom. Josh says, you mentioned Fred Durst on episode 1. Can you give us the story on that connection? So basically that's what happened. Fred Durst, at the time, he had just started the band called Limp Bizkit, so he was playing local clubs to like 5, 6, 7 people on Saturday, Sunday afternoons, and I really wasn't a huge fan of it, but I remember mocking him one time. I was like, bro, that stuff's never going to catch on, man. That's not going to catch on. You need to go like old school punk. That's going to be a new wave of old school punk. But much to my surprise, and probably much to Fred's happiness, he did very well. And Limp Bizkit did go on to do big things. I left Jacksonville Beach, and I wound up moving back to D.C., and then shortly after I went out to San Francisco, stayed about a year out in San Francisco, and I remember looking through the newspaper one day, and I saw that Limp Bizkit was on this big tour with Korn, and they were blowing through San Francisco. And I was like, wow, man, Fred, he blew up. I couldn't believe it, you know? And so anyway, about a year later, moved back to D.C., and then at that point, and Limp Bizkit was huge. They were making tons of records and selling out tours and doing some of the big festivals and stuff. So I came to a local arena on my birthday one year in July. And so I bought a ticket to the show, and I went to the backstage door. I told the guy at the door, I was like, go in there and tell Fred that Tom's out here. Tom Mitchell from Jacksonville Beach is out here. And tell him to take me backstage so we can do backstage stuff. And I remember there was this girl standing next to me, and she's like, man, you don't know Fred Durst. I was like, girl, I know Fred Durst. Look, he did this tattoo for me. He put this X to his scrotum. I traded Fred a bed for a tattoo. It's like, you don't know Fred Durst. And so anyway, finally I convinced the guy at the backstage door to go and get Fred. So sure enough, about 15 minutes later, Fred comes close to the door and peeks out and sees me. And I'm like, Fred, what's up? It's me. It's Tom from Jacksonville Beach. Take me backstage, bro. Let's do backstage stuff. And Fred's like, I'll be right back. I'll be right back. And Fred never came back. Fred left me standing at that backstage door with that girl looking at me going, see, I knew you didn't know Fred Durst. And so you're going to be hard-pressed to get me to say anything nice about Fred Durst. My boy left me hanging by the backstage door. I guess he forgot about all the little people when he blew up. It was shortly thereafter, though, that Rolling Stone magazine named Limp Bizkit as the worst band in history. So there is some poetic justice there. Karma's interesting. And it always reaps its rewards or whatever. But anyway, so that's the Fred Durst story and my claim to fame. I used to live with Fred Durst. He did another tattoo for me as well, too. So he did a couple of my tattoos. I'm not really sure what he's doing these days, but, wish you well, Fred. Anyways, next question from Liz Verning. Liz asks, what is the most down-to-your-soul marrow thing that you have learned? And then the second part of the question is the most down-to-your-soul marrow thing that you give. Well, I think, the most down-to-my-soul marrow thing that I've learned is that in this country, there is an acceptable amount of dead children that we can live with. And I'm talking about the childhood cancer community. I'm talking about the number of children who are diagnosed and subsequently die every year from childhood cancer. This number has not decreased in 30 or 40 years. It's only increased. And funding for childhood cancer research is nothing more than an afterthought at the National Cancer Institute. And so it's a bitter pill to have to swallow to know that our children are not a priority in this country. We'll spend a lot of money on a lot of different things, but there's an acceptable amount. And, they consider it to be rare, even though it equals out to about 5 entire elementary schools a year of children who die from childhood cancer. That's considered rare in this country. And the government considers it an acceptable amount of children, 5 elementary schools. So they don't increase the funding. It's been at a stagnant 4 to 7% for as long as I've been in the childhood cancer community. And this isn't the first time you guys have heard me talk about this, but I'm answering this question honestly. That's the most down to my soul marrow thing that I've had to learn is that, that's a fact. There's an acceptable amount of dead children. And if you are watching this and you're hearing that, and you don't do anything about it, then that's an acceptable number to you too. And that's pause for thought. It was for me, and perhaps it will be for you too. So the second part of the question is the most down to your soul marrow thing that you give. So I think it's fair to say when I meet children with cancer, I legit give a piece of me to every child that I interact with. I give from every corner of my soul when it comes to these children. And it's funny because I do this every time. Obviously COVID has hemmed up visits, so I haven't been on a lot of visits for the past year, although I've stayed in touch, thankfully, via Zoom and through technology with a lot of kids, and we're still supporting families, and we're still doing a lot of things. Stillbrave is still rocking, but a lot of the in-person visits at the hospitals and the clinics and stuff are on hold right now because of COVID. Although I'm now fully vaccinated, still going to be a while. That's going to be probably the one area that takes the longest to bounce back from, understandably so. But the funny thing is, like, every time I would go to meet a new kid, I would get to the door of the hospital room and I'd have this pep talk with myself. I'd be like, Tom, you go in there. I said, no matter what that kid says, no matter how that kid acts, you go in there and you say, hi, my name's Tom Mitchell. I'm the director of Stillbrave Childhood Cancer Foundation. I'm here to help you. I'm here to help your family, blah, 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 but I'm not going to fall in love with you. There's no way you're going to win my soul. It's not going to happen. I'd pep myself up and I'd walk in and I'd say, hi, and that kid would bat their eyes at me, or that kid would smile at me, and I'd be like, I'm about to buy you a pony. And that was it. So they get me every single time. And I did it. I don't know why. I probably would still do it. I'll have a stupid pep talk with myself as if somehow it's going to be different. But I give a part of me to these children. And unfortunately, when these kids do, sometimes the outcomes aren't what we want. And when they pass away, I think it's fair to say that a piece of me dies too. And that's, it's my truth. Hopefully I've got a lot of pieces left. So there's the answer to that question. So the next several questions, they're all pretty similar, but people took the time to submit the questions. So I want to be courteous to those people. So I'm going to read all of the questions, these 4 or 5 questions, and then I'll sort of answer all of them together because I think they're all very, very similar questions. So Andrea Flower Noise says, how do you keep your soul from being crushed and protected when you witness suffering and so many untimely deaths? How do you not curl up in a ball and become bitter? P.S. Thanks for staying strong and still brave. And then Colleen Montgomery asks, how do you cope with so much loss? My son was diagnosed in 1997, and it never gets easier. Each child is heartbreaking. And an old good friend of mine, Jackie Durham, thanks, Jackie, for submitting a question. Jackie is a old skydiving friend of mine, and her husband, Holt, was one of my instructors back in like 2001 or something when I was getting my skydiving license. But she asks, how do you manage to keep your positivity in the midst of such overwhelming tragedy? If you do have dark moments, what do you do to pull yourself up? And then another friend of mine, luckily, I've got a lot of response from a lot of friends. Marianne messaged me and she said, how do you hold the balance of so much grief and so much love? So all those questions are very, very similar. And I get that question a lot. And I think I answered it a little bit in a previous episode, when I talked about the pain factor of, when my daughter passed away. And I'll go through it. I'll tell you the story again real quickly. If you heard it on a previous episode, I apologize, but it's really my canned answer for this because it's my truth. So when my daughter passed away, on a scale of 1 to 10, it hurt a 12. I've never experienced anything as excruciating as that. And when I get close to these other children, now fortunately we have a lot of really good outcomes and a lot of positive outcomes, and that's part of the way that I continue to keep doing it, because I got a phone call, was texting with a girl named Serena today. I started hanging out with Serena back, I don't even remember how many years ago. She was 13, 14 years old, and she was an artist, an aspiring artist, and I'd bring art supplies over to the hospital, over to her house, and we'd go out to dinner, and we'd hang out, and we'd go to movies, and we had a really great time. And she just messaged me. She's about to graduate with a master's degree from college, and she still calls me, and she still tells me, hey, I love you, Tom, and I can't wait to see you, and that kind of stuff. And also even when children do pass away, I still get messages and invites to dinner from those families. I get family, and I get connection, and I get things from this that I never imagined in a million years that I would get. And it certainly doesn't make any of the pain and the sadness any easier. But again, on a scale of 1 to 10, when my daughter passed away, it hurt like a 12. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, when other kids, that I get close to pass away, it hurts 10, as it should, And then once in a while, when I'm particularly close to a kid, it hurts like 11. And that that does happen a lot. But one thing that hasn't happened yet is I haven't gotten back to 12. So as hard as it was to endure and navigate my way through that 12, I was able to do it. And not a lot of people can do it. And just judging from these questions, it's something that people really want to know, because I guess, for them, they couldn't imagine doing it themselves. And I get that a lot. I couldn't do what you do. I don't know how you do it. that kind of stuff. But for me, it's a little different because I don't know how you don't do it, because there's so much beauty interwoven in it, even when it's not pretty. That I guess, if you weren't privy to it on an intimate level like I am, you wouldn't really fully understand the beauty that's interwoven in all the sadness. So as for me, my work is my therapy, and the grief and the hurt and the sadness that sometimes accompanies my work is satiated by more work. So in order to keep, it's like treading water, maybe, for lack of a better way. I just keep treading water. I just keep swimming. I just keep rowing. I just keep going. I just keep winging it. I'm not. I don't identify as a Christian, as many of you know, but I know the Bible back and forth, this way and that way. And one of my favorite things I've ever read in the Bible is from the book of Isaiah, chapter 6, verse 8. And God's got some kind of scam, or not scam, but some kind of mission coming up. And he says, the quote goes like, or the chapter goes like this: "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Who shall I send, and who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here am I, send me.'" So after my daughter died, I said that. I was like, "Here am I, send me. I'll go. I'll go where a lot of people are afraid to go, where a lot of people don't want to go, where the sadness and the suffering and the hurt crushes people. And I'll go there, and I will do this bidding, and I will be a man who shows up for these children when a lot of people, including their families, through no fault of their own, but sometimes they're turning the other way because it's just too much. And so I'll go in and be there, and breathe with them and talk to them and get close to them and laugh with them and cry with them and everything else. It's kind of like, I guess I don't want to compare myself to like a hospice worker or a nurse or something like that, because those guys they're my heroes. I mean, they go in day after day after day, knowing full well what the potential what the potential outcomes could be, and yet they get up every day and they go to work. And the thing for me too is a lot of people, I mean, maybe you realize, maybe you don't, but I also get to walk into the hospital rooms with all the times I'm bringing presents, and I'm helping to pay rent, and I'm helping with gas bills and car repairs. So people, when I walk into the hospital rooms, their moods change, and they get happy and they get excited, and there's a high level of positive energy in there, and I get to experience all that energy. And again, that's that beauty that's interwoven in that situation that may not look so pretty on the surface. There's so much interwoven into that. So there's a lot more to what goes on, and there's a lot of layers and dynamics to what goes on when I walk into a hospital room. So while something may be, on the surface to you sad or tragic or heartbreaking, oftentimes it may be that to me too, but more often than not, it's the complete opposite. It's something totally different that I can't quantify in words, that I feel that stuff. I can't really describe. There's no words for it in English or any other language, quite frankly. It's something that you just feel. And in addition to that, there's never not another kid. So in the DC area where I live, kids are diagnosed at an alarming rate. And so I don't have a lot of time to sit and wallow in my sadness, because there could be another kid, there is another kid who will be newly diagnosed today or tomorrow or the next day, who, for whatever reasons may need a guy like me in his life, or my foundation support. So I can't wallow in the sadness. So I balance it, the grief and the love, by showing up and winging it every day. And the dichotomy is that the healing is in the work that for some people would be the undoing. For me, that's where the healing is. So that's my answer to those questions. There's a lot more to it. It's hard to really answer that question. I hope that was clear for you guys. I couldn't imagine not doing it. I can't think of any other job that I'd want to trade. I know there's like sports stars and rock stars that occasionally take time from their busy schedules to go visit children in the hospitals. But I'm the type of guy that wants to take, all his time visiting children in the hospitals, and then maybe take, a little time occasionally to do other stuff. That's just how I'm built. So next question from Jim Crouch, who was my my skydiving instructor. Also, when I first started skydiving, he's also my boss when I worked at the couple of drop zones that he owned. And he's also the director of safety and training for the United States Parachute Association for a gazillion years. And so Jim is an interesting character. His question, and some of you will know the reference, some of you will not, but the question is, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? And some of you may know it's a quote from a movie. Some of you may know it or not. But since Jim didn't specify whether we were talking about an African or a European swallow, I guess I'm going to have to pick one for you. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a European swallow. So the airspeed velocity of a European unladen swallow is approximately 24 miles an hour. You have to know these things if you're going to be a king, Jim. All right, there you go. So Madison Wynn asked me, some of these questions are crazy, but okay. Madison Wynn asked me, is cereal soup? Why or why not? I'm going to go with no. Cereal is not soup. Cereal is cereal. In the same way that stew is not soup and chili is not soup. And I don't know, I was going to say I don't know any soups that have milk in them. But that's not true. There's a lot of creamy soups and stuff like that. But I think cereal is cereal, soup is soup, and stew is stew. So that's how I'm going to answer that question. I'm standing by that. Cereal is not soup. Okay, moving right along. Joan Keeley asked me, when is the last time you had sex? Do you mean with somebody else? Or yeah, I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to take the 0 on that one. But I appreciate your question, and I appreciate you taking the time to ask it. So my friend David Pesnick asks, and Chris Wilson asked 2 very similar questions. David says, why don't you hang glide? And Chris Wilson says, why don't you paraglide? Well, I think the main reason is that I'm a skydiver, and I run a childhood cancer foundation, and I write poetry, and I sing in punk rock bands, and I run ultramarathons, and I just bought a goat farm, and I have 5 kids, and I got a dog, and I got 3 cats, and 2 of them only have 3 legs. So it's not that I don't want to hang glide or I don't want to paraglide, but I just haven't. I don't know where I'd fit it in right now. I'd fit it into the schedule, but it's not something that I would. But probably maybe I would shy away from it because they both sound like pretty expensive sports if you were going to get into them seriously. And skydiving in and of itself can be a very expensive sport. So I like to stick with what I know. I've been skydiving now since 2001, something like that, 2002. And that's where I get all my energy and excitement and thrills and adrenaline. And I guess I went, I don't know, paragliding may be different than I'm thinking. I went on some kind of thing where they pulled you from the back of a boat one time. It was kind of fun, but anyways. So that's why I don't, not that I won't, but I just got a bunch of other stuff that I'm doing. Okay, so moving right along, and these questions are so diverse, just like the followers of Stillbrave. Everybody's like eclectic and diverse, and I love that. So Lisa McDevitt asks me, if you pray, is there one or some you can share when you are in despair? Well, let me tell you about that. So the short answer is no, I don't really pray. I'm not the type of guy to pray. I'm a half-assed Shin Buddhist, is about as close to as I identify to any type of religion or anything like that. But I'm more of a punk rock Buddhist than anything else. And Buddhism isn't really a religion in that we don't have petitionary prayer because there's no God. There's no person to ask for anything. Buddha was a teacher and a prophet. He was not a god. So there's no real way or person to pray. There's no such thing as petitionary prayer is what I'm trying to say. There are a lot of chants and things like that are used in meditation as a way to calm the body and to center your energy and things like that. And so one of them that I find very inspiring, very encouraging, very motivating is the Bodhisattva Vow. And it's written in a lot of different ways in a lot of different sects of Buddhism. And it just depends on which temple you're attending or which particular sect of Buddhism you happen to be attending. But the Bodhisattva Vow is pretty common in most Buddhist areas. So basically, this is one from the Shin Buddhist temple that I belong to. It says, however countless all living things, I vow to save them. I make this solemn vow that I will strive to save all life from pain and grief, and with the Dharma pave a road to guide all beings to Buddhahood. However endless our angry passions, I vow to extinguish them. I make this solemn vow that I will try to break the grip of craving and desire, and through the Buddha's great compassion, quench the pain of human sorrow. However vast the Buddha Dharma, I vow to learn it. I make this solemn vow that I will aspire to learn the countless lessons of the law, and having learned one, reach still higher until I am free of ignorance. The way of Buddhahood is the way of enlightenment. I vow to attain it. I get down with that. I guess some might call that a prayer. The temple that I belong to, calls it a vow. But I get down with that. And, insofar as like the getting on my hands and knees praying, there's been a couple of times in my life where the desperation, the fear, whatever you want to call it, was so great, and the options for me were almost non-existent. And I got on my hands and knees and I prayed to whoever was out there and to whoever was listening, and my prayers weren't answered, at all. And the things I was praying for seemed pretty reasonable to me. I asked one time for a 2-year-old who was in the ICU to not die from this terrible cancer because her parents were going to be devastated. And, of course, God or whoever's in charge of that kind of stuff isn't really too interested in my opinions about anything. So no, I don't get on my hands and knees and pray. I think that the meditation and the things that I do in the Buddhist traditions help to calm me, help to center my energy. And I think essentially that's really the only thing that prayer does anyway. Prayer helps to center and calm the people that are praying. Petitionary prayer for certain things is only going to lead me to expectations, and then subsequently to disappointment, and my disappointments will be directly proportionate to my expectations. And when I pray to an all-loving God to spare the life of a 2-year-old, and that prayer is ignored, not acknowledged, whatever, for whatever reason, and I don't want to hear the reasons that you may have for why that is, but it just seems like a moot point to me to spend my time doing it. I'd rather pray with my feet. I'd rather pray with my legs. I'd rather get off my ass, get off my hands and my knees, and do something that will actually help somebody, rather than begging or pleading or asking for something out there to do it. I think it's more important for me to take action. I'm not begrudging prayer, and I'm not begrudging those that pray, because I think it's very important that you find whatever it is you need to help to ground yourself, to help to keep your energy contained, to help to keep you calm. And if prayer does that for you, then by all means, I'm about it. I know Jesus was asked about prayer in the Bible, and he was pretty matter of fact about it. He's like, look, just don't be going on and on and on and on like they do in the churches. Your Father in heaven knows what you want before you even ask it. And then he recommends that, you just pray with the Lord's Prayer. And so, the short prayer for the Lord's Prayer is as you wish, just give me the strength, go easy on me. So that's kind of my prayer. I'll do what you want. Give me the strength. Go easy on me. But I will tell you, there's one prayer that I totally do get down with that's a Christian-oriented prayer, and it's the peace prayer of St. Francis. But what you might not know is while this prayer is attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, it's not written by him. I know, you're shocked, but it's been often associated with, he lived from the year 1180 something to 1225, 26, something like that. And the first time that we can find any record of this prayer is in 1912. Many years after Saint Francis of Assisi had died. In 1912, it was copyrighted in a French publication. Interestingly enough, though, St. Francis of Assisi was the patron saint of animals and birds, and that's kind of Buddha-ish, Buddhist-ish in a way. So I get down with this prayer, but I didn't know that it wasn't actually written by St. Francis of Assisi. And what's funny about that is the Franciscan order, which was founded by St. Francis, they fully acknowledge that it wasn't his writing, it wasn't his doing. One of the church historians says this. He says, the most painful moment usually comes when students discover that St. Francis did not write the peace prayer of St. Francis. Noble as its sentiments are, Francis would not have written such a piece, focused as it was on the self, with its constant repetition of the pronouns I and me, and the words God and Jesus never appearing once. So it's kind of fascinating. It's a cool prayer, though, nonetheless. It doesn't make me like it any more or any less. But what's also interesting is when you see the prayer on posters or prayer cards or memes or something like that, you sort of get an abridged version of the actual French version that was copyrighted in 1912. There's no record of anything earlier, and again, the Franciscan order acknowledges that prayer was never contained in any of St. Francis of Assisi's writings. So I'll give you the French translation word for word. This is the whole prayer, which is a little different than the one we normally see, but I get down with this. I like this. To me, it's like the Christian Bodhisattva Vow in and of itself. So I get down with this prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Where there is offense, let me bring pardon. Where there is discord, let me bring union. Where there is error, let me bring truth. Where there is doubt, let me bring faith. Where there is despair, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, let me be your light. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. O Master, let me not seek as much to be consoled as to be consoled. Not to be consoled as to console. To be understood as to understand. To be loved as to love. For it is in giving that one receives. It is in self-forgetting that one finds. It is in pardoning that one is pardoned. It is in dying that one is raised to eternal life. Amen. So I get down with that. To me, it's the Christian version of the Bodhisattva Vow. Again, I think that's more of a chant or a meditation than a prayer, but you can call it what you want, and I like it. So the short answer to your question, or the long answer to your question, Lisa, is those are the two prayers that I get strength from, and that motivate and inspire me to be better. I think both of those prayers really intimate a desire in that person to be better and to be of maximum love and service to his brothers and sisters. And I'm about that. I fail miserably at it daily, but I'm working at it. So the next question, I saw it and then I looked at the question again because I don't know this guy. We're not really friends or anything. But Chris Moline asks, do your whiskers tickle your lady or your man? Not judging, but I'd only want to know the answer to the first. So... excuse me. So I looked at the question, and then I looked to see who this guy's friends were. And sure enough, he's a damn skydiver, and he's friends with Jim Crouch. So it doesn't surprise me that he would ask the question. But I need to be upfront with you. I'd like to answer this question for you, but I can't. You see, I am bound by the solemn promise of centuries of wise men and wizards. I cannot discuss this beard, but I will tell you, there is magic within these whiskers. And that's the answer to that question, Chris. Next question. Christina Calvaheim asks, you had a passion because of Shayla. What would your passion be if she were still here with you? Wow. So I looked at this question briefly earlier, and I didn't write any notes for it because I don't know. I don't know. It's because of Shayla that I have a passion. When Shayla got sick, I owned a small home improvement company, and I was doing, regular people things, and I was living for myself, and I was very, very selfish, and I was very, very self-centered, and I was motivated by money, and I was motivated by a lot of things that I'm not motivated by today. So I don't know what my passion would be if she were still here with me, but I think I would give everything I have today to find out, though. Even if I was just a painter or a carpenter or a taxi cab driver, I would, yeah. All right. Next question is from Christopher. I'm sorry, I'm going to mess your last name up. Khalil. Christopher asks, how did you overcome depression/anxiety with everything that has happened in your life? I'm laughing because it's fascinating to me that you somehow have come to the conclusion that I've overcome these things. I do post a lot, on my social media about, positive things and upbeat things. And I need to be honest with you, though. I haven't overcome depression or anxiety by any stretch of the imagination. What you see on Facebook, while those things are true and those things are a part of me, you only get a glimpse of what my life is like. And it's the things I don't post about on Facebook that are the true heartbeat of not only me, but my foundation. And what you don't see is me standing at the grocery store for 15 minutes looking at Prego versus Ragu and unable to make a decision which spaghetti sauce to grab. Because you see, when my daughter was sick, I would get thrust into situations where the doctor's a good example. My daughter, when she got chemotherapy, initially when it was first administered, her heart stopped working properly because of doxorubicin, which is the red devil. I've talked about this in my TEDx talks. It's one of the worst chemotherapies you can get. It's one that's used most commonly, but studies have shown that it can and does have toxic effect on the heart muscle. And my daughter got mad affected by it as soon as they first administered it, and she had to have a pacemaker and a defibrillator installed under her chest in the event that her heart stopped working. They would give her an electronic jolt that would start her heart again. Well, as we were coming out of the apartment one day on the way to the chemotherapy clinic, and again, you can watch my TEDx talks, which are in the YouTube channel here, to find out more information about this. But this damn thing started shocking her inappropriately. And so we rushed to the hospital, and the doctor's looking at me. He's like, Tom, do you want me to take the defibrillator out? Because if we take it out and we give her more chemotherapy, her heart could stop working. Without the defibrillator, she could die. But if we leave the defibrillator in, it could shock her again and inappropriately. What do you want to do, Mr. Mitchell? You need to make a decision now. What do you want to do? And I had to make a decision. And the decision I had to make wasn't a decision over Prego or Ragu. It was a decision that was about my daughter's life. And so when I stand in front of the grocery store today for 15 minutes looking at spaghetti sauce, I have to be honest with you, the depression and the anxiety, I haven't overcome it. I've learned to live with it. Some days I have to fight it, and some days I win, and some days I don't. And that's how that goes, man. All right, next question. My friend Tanya Presley sent me a barrage of questions, and so I'm just going to go ahead and answer them all. This will be the speed round of questions. She said, if you had to pick one, would you shave your beard or grow your hair out? No, that's the answer. If the winner of the tattoo lottery contest said that you could pick the tattoo, what would you get? What would you want? I want a snake tattoo. I've got very little space left in my body for tattoos, but what I do have is I've got a bunch of strange space that a twisting, winding snake would fill delightfully. So the answer to that question is I would like to get a snake, a really cool cobra, old school cobra type snake. I think that's what I would like. All right, next question from Tanya is, what do you love most about your farmhouse other than the view or that you are a homeowner? So if you guys have been following me on social media, it should be obvious. I love my porch. I've got a mighty fine sitting porch out there. I don't know how many feet long this porch is, but I bet it's 20, 30, 40 feet of front porch. And what's cool about it is I've been going through a a tough time recently with some personal stuff that's going on. And so I went out yesterday and I sat on my porch. And it's hard for a guy like me to just sit and to sit with himself and to sit with his thoughts. But I was sitting out there on the porch. It dawned on me that for the past 80 years, people have been sitting on this porch. And when you're sitting on a porch and you're just sitting on a sitting porch, you're doing a lot more than sitting. There's a lot of thinking going on. Sometimes for me, it was the hardest thing I've done in a long time, was just sit on that sitting porch. But it was fascinating because as I was sitting there and I was thinking thoughts and contemplating the situation that I was in and how it was affecting me and stuff like that, I thought about all the people that had sat on this porch before me in the past 80 years. And I don't know what that number is, but it inspired me to go kind of get I don't know what you'd call it, but just the history on this house, to find out if there's, records down at the county office that'll show me, who's lived here and how long they lived here, and if I can find out any information about them, so that, and when I'm sitting on the porch, maybe I can speculate what they were thinking about, and maybe there's ghosts on the porch. I don't know, but but I love my porch, man. I love it, and it's a mighty fine sitting porch. So the next question she asks is, do you have a valid passport? I don't. I do not. I have never been anywhere outside of the United States. The furthest I've ever gone has been to Hawaii. My daughter Shayla's Make-A-Wish trip was to swim with dolphins. They sent us to Hawaii. Other than that, I've never left the U.S., never been to the Bahamas, never been to Canada, never been anywhere. Traveling just hasn't been in my in my forte or my situation. Maybe later when I get older, I would travel. There's a lot of places I'd like to see. Some of the ancient places, Greece and Rome and Egypt. I'd love to see those places, but as of right now, I do not have a valid passport. And quite frankly, I reckon I don't need one right now. Next question she asks is, do you regret any of your tattoos? Regret is a difficult word for me. I try not to regret anything or too much of anything, because that only leads to more of that depression that we were talking about. If you're sitting around regretting stuff, it's going to lead you to get depressive thoughts and get sad and get uncomfortable about and question yourself about decisions that you made in the past. Likewise, if you're too worried about the future, you're going to be so full of anxiety. When I was singing in a punk rock band, I had a song, and the song was called, I won't tell you what the song was called, but one of the lines from the song was, with one foot in tomorrow and another in yesterday, look at how you're standing. You're pissing on today. So, I don't regret any of my tattoos. There's several tattoos that I almost wish I didn't have, though, because they take up a lot of space that I would like to have gotten some cool stuff. I got some black stuff and some darker stuff that I wish, it doesn't have a lot of significant meaning to me. And now my tattoos do. The tattoos that I get now are very emotional and powerful, and so I regret not the tattoos, but I regret that I don't have enough skin to get more tattoos. That's the answer to that question. Next question, and these questions are weird, Tanya. I don't know what you were thinking. She says, why don't you have a Costco membership? And that's a really good question. You'd think I would have a Costco membership. I got 5 kids. I live on a farm. I run a childhood cancer foundation. I'm a real creature of habit, so I eat the same things all the time. In my house, I drink the same drinks all the time. So it would make sense that I have a Costco membership, but I do not. However, Tanya, if you would like to purchase me a Costco membership, I would gladly accept it. All right. So the next question, and I guess we could tie this back into something that I answered earlier. She says, "What are you afraid of?" And I think I touched on this. This is actually going to be a chapter in my book. I have a tattoo about it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, my daughter, when she died, my daughter died, it hurt 12. And so I've never been back to 12 since then. Nothing in my life has caused me the pain that my daughter's death caused me. Now, I speculate that if another one of my children were perhaps to pass away, it would hurt 12 again. I don't love any of my children more or less than any of the others. So I might experience 12 again. But I know now, through experience, that I can continue to live after 12 because I've done it. I didn't get over my daughter's death. I didn't work through it. I didn't push past it. None of that shit happened. Things definitely didn't get better. They just got different. And today I can live and rest, I guess, in that different. But what I'm afraid of, I'm only afraid of one thing. I'm afraid of 13 because I don't know what it is. So there's going to be a chapter in my book about that. If you guys want to pick up the book when it comes out, you can get more information about what I'm really afraid of and why. So the next question is, this is actually going to be the last question, and then we're going to move on. This is from my friend Ro, who was a volunteer for Stillbrave throughout the years. She was awesome. She would come down from New Jersey to the D.C. area to volunteer at the different events that we had. And she asked me this. She says, I know you do a tremendous amount, pushing yourself to physical and mental, emotional limits most of us can't even imagine. I'm guessing that this is your way of expelling your grief. And most of us can't imagine that because most of us don't know the hell of losing a child. This is kind of an interesting question, actually, Ro. I'm glad you asked me this. She says, but at what point will you know that Shayla is proud of you? How much will you need to do before you know you've done your part? It's an interesting question. So let me answer it this way. I don't think that's going to happen because it's not about how many people I've helped or how many lives I've touched or tipping the scales in my favor or doing my part or doing my bit. It's about the ability to impact and touch people's lives over and over on a daily basis. That's what I want to do. So I would never want to not do that. I don't think. So I don't think I would ever reach a limit where, I can say to you, one of the coolest things that happened to me one time, when you asked this part of the question, you said, but at what point will you know that Shayla is proud of you? So I went to this grief therapy retreat one time, and I'm not a big fan of these things. I think sometimes they're, a little. I'm not a huge fan of them, and I didn't go to a lot of them, but I did go to this one, and I'm glad that I did, though, because the grief counselor who was there did something, an exercise that was so profound and so, I don't even really have a word for it, just so powerful that it changed me that day. And let me tell you what happened. He says to everybody that's there, he says, I want you to sit down, I want you to write. And all of us that were there had lost a son or a daughter to cancer. And there was probably maybe 10 or 15 families on this retreat. And I want to thank the people that invited me to the retreat, the Arms Wide Open Foundation, my very, very good friend, Dina Sherwood, because had I not gone to this retreat, my life was literally changed by this exercise. So what he says to me, and he says to everybody that's there, he says, I want you to sit down, and I want you to write a letter to your son or your daughter. And I want you to ask them all of the questions that you wished you had asked them when they were alive, or that you wished you could ask them now, however far removed you are from their passing. And so I asked questions like, Shayla, are you proud of me? Am I doing right by your life? When you look down on me, do you like what you see? Do you feel that I was a good dad? And I asked a lot of questions that I never asked her outright. She told me and she let me know how she felt, but I just, as part of this exercise, I asked all these questions. And then something happened. Then the guy says, we'd finished our letters and we set them to the side. And then the guy says, now I want you to write a letter from your child back to you. And I was like, wow. So as I'm writing the letter, I know Shayla, and Shayla she's kind of like smart ass, and she's whatever. So when I would ask a question like, are you proud of me? As I was writing the letter, she's like, what do you think, dumbass? And just question and things like that. And she goes, of course I am. Look what you're doing. You never did this shit before, and all this stuff. And so I know through this exercise that my daughter is proud of me. Like, I don't know how I know, but I know. And so that was my motivation. I think that's the motivation of a lot of parents who have lost children when they start foundations, is they want to make their children proud. They want to make their children's life have mattered, and they want to give their children's lives, however short they might have been, purpose and conviction moving forward for as long as they possibly can. And I've done that, and I've accomplished that. I accomplished that the first time that we paid the rent for a family who couldn't pay rent that month. If that was the greatest thing I had ever done, then I would have considered this life to be a success already. But I through the work with my foundation, not just myself, but my entire foundation and the people that work for us have had the ability to do that type of thing over and over and over and over again, and to help people and to touch lives and to impact them in profound and powerful ways. And I see no reason why I would want to stop that. There's not a time where I'd be full from being able to do that. And and the downside sometimes may be that life can get hard in that space, because sometimes the stories don't end the way we want to, and sometimes the stories are tragic and they're heartbreaking and they're hard and they're full of suffering and pain. But again, I'm going to use the analogy that if you can find the beauty in something even when it's not pretty, then you're looking at life through different lenses, and that's what I'm doing today. So there's your answer, Ro. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate all the questions tonight. It's fun, like doing this. Not that I'm an authority on anything, so I appreciate you guys taking the time to. Who really cares what I think about anything? But I appreciate you guys taking the time to ask me these questions. And they're fun to answer, and I look forward to doing this again, maybe. But we're definitely going to have, every time we have guests on from now on, because we want to make it less like an interview and more like a conversation. We're going to allow the guest to ask me 3 questions at the end of each interview, but I won't know what the questions are with my guests, so they'll be able to catch me off guard. One time, along those lines, I was doing an interview with Mike Gillette over at the True 365, and there were 2 girls. There was Vera and another girl that were there, and they're asking me all these questions, and one of them asked me who my celebrity crush was, and it caught me off guard, and I really didn't have time to think about it, but I blurted out Taylor Swift, and they both looked at me like I was a lecherous old man. They're like, "Do you know how old Taylor Swift is?" And blah blah. And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I said that. I met Queen Elizabeth. That's my crush, Queen Elizabeth." Whatever. But you never know. So I am going to have other kids on the podcast, and we'll be interviewing them. So it should be kind of fun to see the questions that they ask. Remember that show where kids just say the darndest things? Man, they damn sure do. Kids will say, they got no filters. So looking forward to that, bringing that segment on each episode, and maybe we'll do another one of these question and answer jams in the future if you guys are down for it. So let me take a couple of minutes and run through some announcements, same as always do. We are a childhood cancer foundation. This podcast is sponsored by the foundation. We're here to talk about a lot of stuff to keep you guys interested and engage you with content, but we're also here to raise money for children with cancer and their families. The programs and services that Stillbrave offer are awesome programs and services, but we can't provide them without awesome people like you. So a couple of things that we have going on right now, and you'll find link in the description section of this YouTube video, is our tattoo auction. We talked about it a little bit before. So all I can say to you is, if you ever wanted a tattoo, can you imagine getting a tattoo that was tax deductible? Like you could write off the tattoo on your taxes? You can if you enter this tattoo auction. If you go to the link, you'll get all the details on how you can enter the auction and the raffle. There's 2 parts to it. There's an auction and a raffle. How you can enter both and what you'll win if you do. We're going to have a big episode about this in the coming weeks and give it a lot more information. This is an auction and a lottery that we're going to ride out until October when we do our Moab 240 race, which leads me right into the Moab 240. So Lauren and I, along with Katie, Nurse Katie, and Charlie's mom Linda, are going out to the Moab Desert in Utah to run a 240-mile ultramarathon through the desert, and we're dedicating each of those 240 miles to a different child who's either fighting cancer, in remission from cancer, or has lost their battle to cancer. You'll find a link in the description section. We're looking for sponsors and we're looking for donations for these miles. There's a friendly competition going on. The winner of both the business and corporate sponsors and the family and friend sponsors will win a series of prizes and stuff like that, whoever raises the most money. But it's a low-key fun, just competition. But we really want to try to get all of these miles fully sponsored. We're looking to raise $240,000. We want to get each mile sponsored at $1,000 per. And I think we can do it, man. Right now, everybody's got COVID quarantine still hanging on. We got plenty of time on our hands. And as things start to unfold, you'll have plenty of opportunities to get out there and wash cars and do lemonade stands. There's a lot of ways you can raise money. And I would love to talk to you about how sponsoring a mile can revitalize not only a family who has lost a child to cancer, but perhaps the community that that child belonged to. There's so much reverberation from this race. It's not just a race. It's not just raising money. It's I don't know if it's fair to say, but it's in many cases, in my daughter's case, it's breathing new life into my daughter who passed away, because her mile will get, hopefully get donations and maybe a sponsorship. And how proud I'm going to be when my daughter's mile gets sponsored, and when people are showing an interest in my daughter and when they're saying her name, and man, and we do that for a lot of families. It's not just about the raising the money piece. We have to do that, but I don't do these races to make money. I just make money so I can do the things that Stillbrave wants to do. And I promised children and their families, particularly families who have lost children to cancer, that I would never, under any circumstances, as long as I was alive, allow their children to be forgotten. Their names, their lives will not be forgotten on my watch, and I mean that, and I stand by that. And you can go to the link in the comment section, and you can read the stories. Each one of those 240 miles isn't really 240 miles. It's 240 children who have either fighting cancer or in remission or have lost their battle to cancer. You can go there, you can see their pictures, you can read their stories. So starting tonight, we're going to introduce you to those kids. We're going to read and choose a particular mile for once a week for the remainder up until the race, so you can get to know them. So tonight I've chosen Daphne, who's mile 212. Daphne was diagnosed with a grade 3 brain cancer on Mother's Day, 2014. While normally considered curable, hers was very aggressive, and despite multiple brain surgeries, chemo, and 2 rounds of radiation, she passed away in October 2015 at the age of 7. Daphne never gave up her fight and always fought with a smile. Everyone who met her immediately fell in love with her. Tattoo Tom was no exception. This was written by her mother. The bios come from the parents. The pictures come from the parents with their blessings. But she says he came to visit her in the hospital after her second brain surgery. She was so mad and frustrated after her surgery because she could not even walk. Tattoo Tom did everything he could think of to try to get her to smile, but she just wasn't buying it. He made a promise, though, that he would get her to smile somehow, some way. And while it wasn't that day, she did smile for him on his next visit. 2 of them then became inseparable and the best of buddies. Daphne spent many weeks away from home in Philadelphia for treatment. While she had very few visitors from home, the distance did not deter Tom. He came to see her several times. I don't think either of them would have had it any other way. We miss Daphne every single day, but we are so grateful for Tattoo Tom. Had Daphne not gotten sick, our lives would not have been blessed with such a wonderful person. Thank you, Tom, for all that you do. Well, I really appreciate your kind words, Kathy. Kathy is Daphne's mom. But it was me that got the better end of that deal, man. That kid, when you never had to wonder if that kid loved you or not. She didn't like everybody. Like Daphne was an interesting kid. She didn't like everybody. And she was quirky and she was full of attitude. But if Daphne, if she loved you, you didn't have to wonder. You didn't have to guess. You knew. When she wrapped her arms around your neck, yeah, you just knew. So after, interestingly, a little side story about Daphne, after I completed the Tahoe 200, which is a 200-mile ultramarathon, Daphne was mile number 100 in that race. So she was the halfway mark. And she was still alive back then. She was pretty sick, but she was still alive. So when you run an ultramarathon, the prize that you get for a 200-mile race of blood, sweat, tears, and hallucination is a belt buckle. That's your great prize for running these 2 fucking races. But anyway, they're highly coveted belt buckles. Like you get bragging rights if you own these belt buckles. So I got a belt buckle for completing the Tahoe 200, and I gave my belt buckle to Daphne. And the reason that I did that is because at mile 100, I wanted to quit. I didn't want to go any further. 100 miles was enough for me. I had blisters on my feet. I was hallucinating. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. It was terrible. But I looked at Daphne's picture at mile 100, and I read her name out loud. And I wasn't going to quit on her. And I wasn't going to quit on anybody's child. So I gave her my belt buckle. You know what she gave me that day? She gave me a pepperoni pizza with the Reese's peanut butter cups on it. And I ate it. And damn it, I liked that pizza. So anyways, we're going to do this, introduce you to one of these kids. Man, I light up when I start talking about these kids, man. I want you guys to go to this website and read these stories and see their pictures. You know, some of the stories are sad in a way, but they're not, though, man. These kids lived, and they were here, and I saw them, and I loved them, and that's why I light up when I talk about them, and I want you to feel that, and I want you to help us, breathe new life into the situations for families and communities, and for me, for me. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and move right along. We'll be introducing you, like I said, to another kid each week. But we're going to move right along into the Who Is This Dude Anyway segment. So this is kind of funny. We talk about my favorite movies, my favorite books, musical performers, things like that. So tonight, when people ask me, like, hey, Tom, what's your favorite movie? My answer, of course, is Billy Jack. But nobody's ever heard of Billy Jack. So every time I say Billy Jack, everybody's like, what? What's that, huh? So I have two other favorite movies, and I love a lot of movies, Godfathers and Rockies and Deer Hunter, and there's great movies, and I love a lot of movies. But when I narrowed it down to my two favorite movies, my number one after Billy Jack, so my number 2 and 3 would be Pulp Fiction, and interestingly enough, another movie that came out the same year as Pulp Fiction is Forrest Gump. These two movies couldn't be any different. Completely, totally opposite, genre, vibe, everything. But I love both these movies. I love everything about them. I may do another segment sometime in the future about Forrest Gump and why I love Forrest Gump so much. Mostly because my life thus far has unfolded like Forrest Gump, only Forrest Gump on like acid or mushrooms or something, because it's been weird. Forrest Gump's life was weird. My life has been weird, but my life has been weird in a weirder way. But I'm going to talk about Pulp Fiction. A lot of people don't know this about me, but I've done a lot of it's been years, but I used to do a lot of community theater. I took a lot of acting lessons at some well-established theaters down in Washington, D.C., and I auditioned for a lot of community theaters. I played in a play called The 6 Degrees of Separation. I got a role in a production of the musical Ragtime. I played Willie Conklin, the racist fire chief, which is a stretch for me because those of you who know me, I'm probably like the least racist person in the world. But apparently, I played this role pretty good because after different performances, people would always come up and tell me about how horrible a person I was. But the character or whatever. But what was really funny about this, and the reason I'm telling you all this, is because when I would go on auditions for these different roles, and it wasn't anything big, I don't want to kid you, but it was just community theater. Although one time I did this Shakespeare experience with Doreen Getzler and Jim Vance, who were like big newscasters, and I think it was some charity Shakespeare event. And so we recited a chapter in a play. It was me and Jim Vance and Doreen Getzler, and I played an elf or a fairy or something, and I had to fawn all over Jim Vance. It was pretty comical. But anyways, the reason I'm telling you all this is because when I would go on my auditions for these different plays at these community theaters and community centers and churches and stuff like that, a lot of times when you go there, they want you to prepare a monologue if they're not going to have you read directly from the script. So my monologue, and I don't know why I chose this because I was young and impetuous, I guess, but my monologue was always the watch scene from the Christopher Walken talking to the young Bruce Willis character, Butch character, in the watch scene. 5 long years he wore this watch up his ass. But that was only one line from it. But I would recite this like 5-minute monologue, and the looks I would get in the community theaters and the community, churches and places that I auditioned was funny. But interestingly enough, it got me a lot of roles too. People just thought I was crazy enough that I could pull off the different roles. It's in The Crucible and a bunch of other stuff just based on this ridiculous monologue that I did. Anyways, one of my favorite movies, my friend Flash and I used to watch this movie, and we could recite this movie, and I probably could still do it today, word for word. I know every single word in this movie, back to back, upside down. I will tell you, if you didn't know, the F word is used 265 times in this movie. So a little bit of fun fact for you about Pulp Fiction. If you haven't seen Pulp Fiction, it's a star-studded movie. I actually had a copy of the script of Pulp Fiction signed by every single person that was in the movie. It was like, I don't even know how I got it. I can't remember. But it was worth a ton of money, and it was one of my most prized possessions. But when I was first starting off Stillbrave, I surrendered it and donated it at one of our auctions so that I could raise money to get Stillbrave up and running. And I don't regret that. But I still like the movie, and I just turned my daughter Abby onto it for the first time. She's 17. She and I just watched it. I'm not entirely sure what she thought about it. I think she got a big kick out of the fact that I enjoyed it so much. So that's it. That's who this dude is anyway. Pulp Fiction was a big favorite movie of mine. We'll probably talk about Forrest Gump sometime in the future. So I want to thank you guys for indulging me tonight, for getting through another episode of the Just Winging It podcast. Hope to see you guys next week when we have Lou and Sue Lamy on. So see you guys then. Still brave, Sarah. Still brave.